Man stopper rounds, test 2. I did a test like this a few months ago where I was testing man stopper rounds according to the one-shot stop statistical charts. And I tested like 357 versus, I believe, 40 and some other ones. And today I'm going to test a couple different calibers that are on that list, a few different varieties of ammo that are on here that have pretty high quote-unquote stopping power. So what I have is 10 millimeter, 40 Smith & Wesson, 38 Special, and 9mm. And I had to kind of tweak some of these loads because some of them are not loaded the way they used to be, and some of them still are. So what we have here is our 10mm Federal Hydra-Shok is a 180 grain. This actually has a stopping power number of 87%. Here's our 40 Smith & Wesson Hydra-Shok. It is our 155 grain. That has a stopping power of 94%. That's pretty high. Now with these two, I had to tweak them a little bit. You know, 38 Special, the original round on this list was the Winchester Super X lead hollow point 158 grain, and that was a plus P. But they were showing on that list that a round like that is going to give about 996 feet per second. Well, Winchester's round nowadays is only like 800 feet per second. So I went with the Buffalo Bore standard pressure because that generally gives about an even 1,000 feet per second in a 4-inch barrel. So that should give us a fair test of what, 78% one-shot stop looks like. Our 9mm, that was just listed as a Remington 115 plus P. This is a HTP variation and a 115 plus P, but it just says Remington, which back in the day that would be like UMC or Express. It's pretty much exactly the same ammo. This is just rebranded as HTP. So we're gonna see what we get here. And with our 9mm, actually showed a stopping power number of 89%, which is really surprising. The 38 showed 78%. So I'm going to use 5-inch pistols and a 4-inch revolver to try to be as fair as possible. Now the test guns that were used were a little bit different. Like the semi-autos were 4 and 4¼ inch. I'm using all 5-inch, but the revolver was a 4-inch. But that should just give us a little bit better performance. So that should be a fair way to test that. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. I'm going to do a shot with all 4 of these rounds and just plain clear ballistics. That'll be our best case scenario, where we're just hitting right into clear ballistics with nothing else in the way. Then I'm going to put up a fresh block, and I'm going to put in a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard after 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting like a ribs or sternum. And in front of that, we're going to have 4 layers of denim. And I think with stuff like this, people are going to be mostly concerned about their shootability in a real world situation. So I'm going to just shoot from 12 yards at my steel with all these and kind of see how they compare. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our 9mm. This was actually showing at 1288 feet per second on the one-shot stop statistics. Let's see what we get in our 5-inch pistol here. 1284, that's really close. 1281. 1298. 1268, 1286. So we're really close to the exact power, velocity, and everything that they had on that one-shot stop for a generic Remington bullet. So let's see what we get here with our 38 Special. This showed at 996 feet per second. So let's see what this gives us. 968, 1034. 1004, 1012, 1007. That's really close as well. The 40 was showing at 1140 feet per second on those charts. So let's see what we get, how close we get to 1140. 1166, 1183, 1182, 1163. So a little bit above, but really close to those charts. Now our 10mm here, this was actually showing at 980 feet per second. And this is a 180 grain, so let's see how close we get to 980 feet per second in my 5.3-inch Glock here. 1028, 1046, 1060, 1033. So this one's the most above, but not by a huge margin. So I think as far as looking at these and comparing them all based on those charts, I think we're going to be really fair for seeing, what they actually got back in the day comparing all these. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see what we get. All right, plain gel, best case scenario. I say best case scenario as in best case scenario for the bullet to perform properly. So I wanted to make that clear. It's not really a good scenario when you have to use your gun for self-defense, but let's see what we got with our 9mm here. And let's hit it with our 38 special. All right, let's try the 40 and 10mm now. All right, 40 caliber and 10mm. Go take a look. All right, I tried to space these out the best I could so that, you know, you could see all these. I got the 10 and the 38 a little bit close, but we can still tell our penetration and everything here. So what we got for our 9mm and just plain gel is we got about 11.5 inches. We got really big expansion. And, you know, that's typical of what you kind of see with like 357 Magnum, where you get, you know, a little bit less than, you know, 12 inches, yet it expands huge. So looking at it this way, I can kind of see why that cheap Remington probably does as well as it does. Now with the 38 special, its bullets suck back a little bit, and that happens when we get giant expansion. It just kind of sucks back through the gel where there's an opening hole. But what we got here is we got almost exactly the same, but I think we're more at like 11.75 inches penetration total. The bullet sucked back a little bit. Now with our 40 caliber, we got the best penetration, which for being a 155 grain, that's actually pretty surprising. We got penetration of about 17.25 inches and really good expansion. And with our 10mm, that's a little bit heavier bullet. I believe it was less powerful, so this is kind of interesting. Or it might have been about the same power, but what we got is about 13.25 inches. And we got really good expansion. So if we go by our IWBA or FBI standards, where you want 12 inches of penetration, our 40 and our 10mm did it just fine. Our 38 and our 9mm is a little shallow, but that's, you know, splitting hairs there when you're getting that close, because those numbers are intended to represent going through an arm from the side and still getting adequate thoracic cavity penetration. And, you know, if you made a front-on shot with that 38 or that 9mm, I think you're doing your job just fine. So let me pull up a new block and we'll hit this stuff with our MDF in place in our denim. All right, we have 4 layers of denim, 3 inches of clear ballistics, 1/4 inch MDF into more clear ballistics. See how our 9mm does. All right, let's hit it with the 38 special. All right, let's try our other calibers. All right, 40 caliber. All right, 10mm. Let's go take a look. All right, so let's start with these up here. You know, these are through our MDF. Came down, might have actually hit that bullet with our 10mm, but it's very consistent with what we saw with our plain gel shot, except we got more penetration. So I'm just going to take that number. But what we're seeing, you know, these are both Hyder shocks, our 40 and our 10mm. Very similar penetration. Our 40 caliber, it got a penetration of about 16.5 inches expansion. Our 10mm got about 17.25. It looks like the expansion would have went down just a little bit. Now in the back here, it's kind of hard to see, but with our 9mm, we got a penetration of about 12.25 inches. So we lowered that expansion just enough for that to work, but I am really surprised because that 9mm, a lot of times 9mm doesn't necessarily perform, and this is cheap 9mm and it is performing. That's incredible. Now at the 38 special, we got more expansion, a little bit more mangled bullet. We got about 11.75 total penetration, good amount of damage in there. So it looks like our 38 is just a little bit shallow, but overall, it's pretty similar to what we got in plain gel. Not a huge difference there. So let's shoot from that 12 yards, see what kind of practical accuracy I can get. I know sometimes people like to see bullets close up right from the gel, not just the measurements. So there's our 9mm in plain gel compared to what it was through a medium density fiberboard. Very consistent. Our 38 special was massive through our plain gel, not so massive with our MDF, shaved off a little of that. 10mm, again, really big expansion. Through our MDF, a little bit less. It looks like I took a chunk off with a different bullet, and we saw that one time. But overall, our expansion is going to be about the same. And with our 40, real big, not huge, but real big with our plain gel, and with our MDF, not a huge difference in overall size of what it took off that expansion. So 40, 10, 38, 9mm. All right, 12 yards from the target. I'm going to compare our 10mm and our 40 first. I only have a few rounds of these 10s left, so let's see what I get. All right, very shootable round, a very, reliable round. I'm using this Glock conversion here. So if you had a 10mm pistol that was kind of smaller or lighter, I think that would be a very reliable round. But it's not really a 10mm in the true sense. 40 Smith & Wesson. Let's see what this will do for me. All right, pretty nice. Let me hit that with the 9mm and the 38 special. 9mm. All right. 38 special. Nice shooting round. I just can't resist. I gotta back it up. These rounds shoot pretty well. I want to see what they'll do at 75 yards. That's fun for me every time I'm out here. So let me paint that up and back up to 75. All right, 75 yards. One thing I like about this is, if I can get like really tight groups when I'm chronographing, then like at 12 yards, I wasn't even trying to really hit. Just kind of throwing them, they were hitting. So if I can hit 75 yards, that's always kind of like the icing on the cake for a round of ammunition. And it helps me kind of call what I think about that. So 9mm. Let's see what I can do. 75 yards. All right, so that miss, they're shooting just a hair high. So I started aiming lower, trying to figure out where they're at for me. So that's one thing to note, but I mean, overall, our accuracy is really good. So 38 special. Let's see what I can do with this. All right, I don't know where that hit. One more round in my pocket here. Now I got 6. I'm trying to figure out where these are hitting. All right, kind of hard to tell exactly where I'm hitting with those, but the first shot that I missed, I was aiming really dead center, and then I started aiming a little bit lower, thinking it's a possibility being heavy, they might go high. 40 caliber. See what I can do with this. All right, so I don't know exactly what I did wrong with those misses. I was aiming high. You know, one time I saw my sight go a little bit to the left, like maybe I pulled it to the left, but otherwise, you know, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe it's just me with this gun, because it seems like I'm not that good with that 40 compared to the 9mm. So, but overall, what I'm seeing here, if I add everything in here, the thing that surprises me the most out of all this is that 9mm. You know, it performed really well. We got under penetration on plain gel. However, that's how a 357 Magnum with the semi-jacketed tip acts. So we're seeing kind of the same effect. Everything about that 9mm surprises me, because there's a lot of ammo out there that's really, really high end that doesn't perform that well. And everything about that 9mm is extraordinarily consistent. And that is one of the cheapest 9mm you can buy if you can find the Plus P version. So really surprised at that. Our 10mm, that's actually a pretty good load. And you know, a lot of people don't like loads like that. They're like, oh, that's watered down. But honestly, when we're talking about self-defense, we really don't want those rounds that are really, really, really high recoiling. You know, even though my Glock is a Jam-O-Matic, even if it was a perfectly functioning pistol, I think a lot of times what people don't take into consideration is they get these really tough stances on the range. They really get into it, and they don't realize when the real world comes, they might be shooting out their window at somebody trying to kill them, and they're gonna be shooting like that. They're not gonna have good control over that. So I look for rounds that are gonna be reliable no matter what you do to them. That's what I look for. I don't care about the fact that people can shoot perfect, and if you jam it and they're like, oh, you're limp wristing. I care about it being reliable in any situation. And that 10mm was definitely more reliable than most for me. The 40 caliber, very good performance. We had a little bit deeper penetration than the rest of these, which really surprised me, because it's a 155 grain. You know, there's like 155, 165, 180 in our HydroShocks, and being the you know, lightest weight and having such good expansion, you would think it wouldn't penetrate as far as it did, but it penetrated really well. So when it says 94% one-shot stop, I kind of agree with that, because you know, it's very rare to see this big, huge expansion and then go deeper than most, and that's what that did. So that is a very, very good round overall, even for being old school. Now 38 Special, that's old school, and everything about it performed really well. You know, it has a 78% one-shot stop with that particular load, or something like that load. And we're seeing really big mushrooming in plain gel. We're seeing just shy of adequate penetration through MDF and plain gel. But overall, it wasn't like extreme under penetration. And I think really what's going to drop the amount of stopping power is its energy's a little bit lower than a lot of rounds. You know, it's in like the low 300s for foot-pounds. Not particularly powerful, and it expands really big, you know. So overall, I think it did really well. It's probably one of the best 38 Special loads out there, but comparing them to these loads, you know, it's a little bit low down there in ability, but still really good loads. So that's what you get today with all these rounds. I was pleasantly surprised with actually most of them, especially the 9mm. Very good loads, very good, you know, stopping power. I could see how, you know, those numbers would equate out in the real world based on my gel test, and you know, it all kind of adds up. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.